Okay, but what we have decided for this weekend is that Jesus is enough to say that there is your answer for hell. Okay, I like what Jeff said. If you can go to the feet of the cross and you can commit deicide and God only offers forgiveness, then a simple temporal rejection of him based in your ignorance of the now is not going to warrant an eternal retributive response. Okay? Does that make sense? You know, I put it to one of my mentors like this. I said, you know, you continually talk about the I am not that lives within each of us, and we all have it. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm not handsome enough. I don't have that one. I got a hot wife. I can't be that ugly. But I just said, you know, when that internal I am not meets the eternal I am, that not falls off. And all that keeps us from saying no, 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 or from saying yes and keeps us saying no is knocked off. Paul calls it, in that moment we will know as we are known. We can say it theologically by saying theosis is realized when we see him face to face. You know, so there's some stuff going on in how we approach this that we need to think through first. And I was just talking to my class back there, and you know, I mean, like, how many of you really just understand everything that's going on in the class? No. But what we're doing is we're trying to learn that there is a particular way that we can frame things, that we are talking about the Abba of Jesus. And then there is a way that we can frame things that we are not. And what we're trying to get back to is a faith that answers first to Jesus and then to the text. Because we're not there in any respect. We'll say, well, God, what do you have to say about? And then we'll go do a word search. Well, how many times is the word money mentioned in the Bible? Let's go look up every verse on money and proclaim those over myself so I won't be poor anymore. You know, and we just take this thoroughly Gnostic approach to reading the Bible. But I don't want to get into all that because that was boring, although necessary. What I do want to say is, you know, like I said, I've found that every question comes back to, how are you reading your text? You know, are you approaching the text saying, this is what I believe, and now I'm going to confirm it? Are you approaching the text saying, I need revelation, and I'm going to find it? Or are you approaching the text saying, okay, this is very confusing, but we're here to rightly divide the word? Because that's about the only answer that I think we can really give if we're going to be faithful to what we're called to do. You know, we're not called to preach the Bible. We're called to declare the success of Jesus Christ. And yes, we find the story of that success on the pages of the Bible. Okay? And so that's why we cannot disconnect from the Scriptures. But what I want to say and what I want to get into today is, what is it that we are being saved from? Why are we confessing? You know, what is this all about? Is being a Christian believing the Jesus myth? Did I just offend you by saying myth after Jesus? Okay, don't throw me out for saying that because I'll explain this. But is that what being a Christian is about? Does Jesus ever say, hey, okay, I'll tell you what, if you believe everything that is said about me that is not yet written, then you will be one of mine? Did he say they will know you are mine by your ability to needlessly recite the text? They will know you're mine by your ability to abuse them with the Bible. No, it's by our love. Period. That's it. Not by your profession of faith, not by your ability to pray a sinner's prayer, not by what, you know, and this just depends on what stream of Christianity you're in, because while the Orthodox don't have a sinner's prayer, you have to belong to their church. You know, and while the Catholics are kind of a blend of the two, like it's still an exclusionary practice. So is that what it's all about? Is it about believing a particular story about Jesus of Nazareth? Is that what makes us Christians? To the evangelical, the answer is yes. Because what is necessary to be a Christian is confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, and you will be saved. And never will we go look at the political implications of what was just said there. Confess with your mouth and believe with your heart that Jesus is Lord carries an unspoken connotation, and Caesar is not, to the Greek. And so what we're saying is Jesus is Lord, and whoever happens to get elected is not, even if I like them. Jesus is still Lord if my candidate gets into office. And come November 2nd, he'll still be the one whose shoulders the government rests on. No matter who gets in, and no matter how fearful we want to be about what might happen next, because all sides have their fear approach that they're going to take. Well, if he's elected, this will happen. If she's elected, this will happen. If he's elected, this will happen. And it's all based in fear. And if it is based in fear, it is satanic. So let's just take a step back and breathe and say, Jesus, the government will still be on your shoulders on November 3rd. Cool? So are we being saved from, then, God? Because this is exactly what we've presented. And to my group, this is why theology matters. I just said this. We come in and we read the Bible with no theological backing, and we say, well, it says this, so what do we do? But the problem is, this is where the Catholic Church had it right. They didn't let the common person read the Bible because the common person isn't supposed to read the Bible and just go, okay, well, this is what it's saying. You have to have training. You have to know ancient Greek. You have to know Hebrew. You have to understand what an abjad text is. That's a string of consonants with no spaces, no vowels, and no punctuation. And this is what the Bible is, and yet we'll say, oh, it's inerrant, inspired, totally infallible. Even just the English transliteration doesn't fit that, let alone the claims that are made. So we get into this, and we start saying, you're saved from the wrath of God because the wrath of God was poured out on Jesus on the cross. Yes, good Jesus, stepping in the way of the angry, alcoholic, abusive father. I'm trying to talk a little faster so you'll feel like Jeff is up here. Yeah, I know. Yeah. And that's what we're saying. When we say that God poured his wrath on Jesus, we are saying you are saved from God's wrath by Jesus. Which means God wanted to kill you, but Jesus said no. Okay? Theologically, this does not work. It's called bifurcating the hypostatic union. Big words, aren't those fun? What it means is you've laid waste to the Trinity. And you've said, no, they are not one. They do not exist as one. They operate individually of each other. And one of them is so pissed off, he wanted to kill you, but the other two said, no! We might need them later to spread our religion. And so God the Father said, fine, but I'm going to take every ounce of your blood. Really? This is why theology matters. Because if we can get God is love before we do anything else, then what are we going to do? We're going to approach the text, and we're going to say, okay, I know that God is love. And if something in the text doesn't seem to confirm that, I'm not going to say, text, you are correct, and God is not love. I'm going to say, I don't get that, and I'm going to start researching. And I'm going to ask people who know. And if nobody knows, I'm going to put it on my top shelf of my bookshelf in my office, where all of my what the hell does that mean questions are. And all of the books that relate to those questions that I haven't been able to read yet because my mind is still too close to the pain. Now, this is it. We can't deconstruct what we're still being hurt by. And so when we're being hurt by God, it's really hard to take a look. Okay, are we being saved from Jesus? If the Father judges no one and has committed all judgment to the Son, then we're waiting this final, eternal, great white throne of judgment, aren't we? At the end of all time? Well, let me tell you about the nature of time. Time is linear. Okay? And yeah, there's some time-traveling people that want to talk about time being cyclical, but even in that model, there still is a front and a back to time that you can fold it over itself and you can approach them and whatever. Cool. Okay, be a physicist and tell me you can travel, that's fine. But time will always be linear. The nature of timelessness is that Bob walked into eternity and turned around and grabbed Darlene. Whether that's 80 years here on earth, or 25 years, or whatever it is until you go see him again, it's like that, because we all arrive at once when it is a timeless realm. And we arrive behind the Lamb, not who is in the way of God, but who is saying, look, holy, blameless, and above reproach. So are we being saved from Jesus? Are we awaiting some judgment, or did he offer it with, Father, forgive them? I think he offered it. Okay, so then we must be being saved from hell. Well, are we? I mean, we did enough deconstruction this week that, I'll give you a brief. Let's throw you in the deep end philosophically. God is the source and ground of all being. God calls himself I am, and everything that is subject to God's own isness. Our being is because he is being. He is existence, so we exist. Okay? As the fundamental ground of all being, there can be nothing that exists in opposition to him that is not equal to him. Does that make sense? Please raise your hands if it doesn't, because I want this to be clear. Okay. Good. There's a couple. No, this is good. Let's put it this way. God is the positively charged ion of the universe, and there are no negatives, because nothing can be that doesn't come from him. And so everything that comes from him will be positively charged. Okay? And this is why he is what binds all things together, holds them together by the power of his word. Okay? We are not held together by ink and paper on a book. We are held together by the power of the one who can speak, and creation happens from the peacefulness of his voice. So then, as Jeff said, if hell existed as a realm that does not derive its being from the source of all being, then that place is a God itself. And we don't believe that, because we believe God is. No matter what you want to say about your particular doctrinal or denominational bent, the fundamental truth of your faith is God is. You take for granted that God exists, and you take for granted that God is creator. You don't reflect upon God as, well, maybe God doesn't exist, maybe. So this is our truth. So everything must be funneled through that truth. Okay? Then maybe we could say we're saved from ourselves. Because what is it that was lost? Have we gotten into a place where we have actually lost God? Can that which gives life to all living things be lost? So then something must have happened that necessitated Jesus coming in the flesh and showing us a particular thing. So what was lost? What continues to be lost today? Our humanity. This is what we have lost. When we read stories of some crazy Southern Baptist blowing up an abortion clinic, or some member of a crazy sect of Islam killing somebody, these are people, they are not evil, they have lost their humanity. And in the void of humanity lies evil. And this is why Jesus is so important. It's not about inviting him into your heart so that you get into heaven and get out of hell one day. It's about learning to be human, because we are so inhuman. We will torture and kill anyone that doesn't look like us because they did something we don't like. Not mean like us personally, but like we'll flip the switch. We'll cast our vote in such a way that torture will be the new MO. And I'm not talking about just America. Like, this is global. I mean, this is an international thing, because it is a problem that is common to humans. It's not just Westerners. We like to beat on Westerners because we are them, and it's real easy to critique the system that you benefit from. I'm serious. It is. It's very easy to critique a system that you get all of your sustenance from. But this is global. This is a human issue. We have lost our humanity. And we have been losing our humanity from the dawn of time by trying to be God. That's the story of Adam and Eve. They lost their humanity because they're trying to attain to something that they were never meant to be. You are not meant to be divine. You're not going to be divine. He is. I know that hurts. And I used to preach it too, and I had to come to that realization. You're a human, and God has revealed that human is absolutely holy. You know, that's not to devalue you, to say you're not divine. It's just to say you're other than him. And he's other than you. And that's okay. We're allowed to be not everything. It's all right. I know that in some of our modern charismatic doctrine, everyone's a preacher, everyone's a pastor, everyone's a teacher, everyone's a prophet. No, they're not. There are healers in the world. A lot of them are called doctors now because they had that desire within themselves, and that's what they knew to do, go to medical school. And they're healers. And there are teachers in this world. You know? If I invite my wife up here, she could say some good things, and she could get you stirred up. And I mean, she was preaching last night to Jeff, commanding him to confess his sins and all. It was great. But you know what? If I say, hey, would you come up and teach what I'm about to teach? She'd go, no, because she's not a teacher. But everybody's everything. No, it's okay. That doesn't make the teacher better than the prophet. And it certainly doesn't make the prophet better than the layperson. It just says, hey, we need each other. I might need a healer from time to time. You know, I might need someone who is an evangelist from time to time. I might need someone who knows how to really kind of like break this stuff apart. And that's okay. It's not saying you can't get it without anyone. It's just like need other people. It's a beautiful thing to live in community. In all of our disagreements. If the Bible teaches us anything, it's that we can disagree and remain friends. Stanley Hauerwas says one of the most beautiful things about American Christianity is that we can fight tooth and nail for what we believe in and still call ourselves the Christian church. And I think he's like, you know, this is a testament to the power of Jesus within us, that we can fight and not become enemies. And like, man, I used to like not want to fight. And that didn't give me like, let's go fight. But it's like, no, like it's okay to have these disagreements. I can disagree with who Bruce is going to vote for and still honor him as a person, and we're going to get along fine. You know, and I mean, and we get a little like about our politics, especially in election years. But at the end of the day, like, hey, you know what? No matter who gets elected in January, we're all still going to be citizens of America. Hopefully. Sorry, I had to throw it out there. So then how does Jesus help us to regain that which we have lost? Because he came to seek and save that which was lost. And that which was lost was our humanity. So how does Jesus help us reclaim that humanity? Well, I think about the most simple way we can talk about that is the cross. Because in a moment of unjustified murder, of wrongly accused guilt, of torture, horrendous torture, and abuse, at a time when a God who has all the power in the universe could have called down retribution on people and just said, you know what, this hurts too bad, I'm not doing it. And yet all he has to say is forgive them. This is not a spiritual forgive them. Jesus is not being a mystic who's not feeling any pain. He's feeling the weight and the pressure of his body crushing him. And he still offers forgiveness. And he teaches love your enemies. And he teaches do good to those who use you. Bless those who curse you. I mentioned yesterday the story of Naaman the Syrian. I mean, Elijah heals this guy with full knowledge that what he's just done is going to result in more deaths of his own people. Only God can do something like that. And this is what makes us Christians when we act like that. It does not make us Christians to believe the Jesus myth. And when I say myth, those of you who are here, I'm not saying fiction. I'm saying the collective grouping of stories and things that arose out of the Christ event. Because some of them are very, very factual, and some of them are meant to be a little more legendary to kind of bolster, and that's fine. We don't need to discount them. James Allison's just talking in this class about the crater that's left behind when an asteroid hits the Earth, or a meteorite, those of you who might know that better. And he gives this specific one down off the coast of Mexico that is underwater, and there's no remnants of the meteorite left. But they can deduce by the size of the crater exactly what it was, how big it was, how dense it was, and how fast it hit the Earth. And this is what the Christ event is. We are discerning through the Bible and through the apostles the crater left by the impact of Jesus. And we can deduce from that crater exactly the velocity he hit the Earth with, but we can't piece him back together. And this is the way theophany works. You only recognize God when it's in the past. God doesn't stand in front of you and let you see his face. And this because there is no face to be seen. You recognize God as the bush that is burning yet not consumed. And you say, that was God. You recognize God as the moment where I broke and felt my wife's pain. And it just made me weep, and I had to go hold her. And I had no more religious remarks. I had no more Bible verses. But I look back now and I say, man, that was God. I didn't at the moment think, oh, Father, thank you, and started rejoicing in my bliss. I felt the pain and realized that pain was God. And that's what we do. This is why John says no man has seen God at any time. It's not like, hey, Isaiah was a liar. It's like, no, you just can't see him. That's just how it works. You can only recognize him when it's happened. So that God is intimately connected with every area of your life, but not at your disposal. I was talking to Lindsay afterwards yesterday, and I just said, I tend to take this like, well, why do we get sick? Why do we get sick? Why doesn't God protect us all? It must be coming from here if it's not coming from here and all this. And don't get into all that. Rather disconnect yourself and say, maybe it's just that God is so madly in love with me that this blindsided him too. That he was so intently looking into my eyes that he was like, oh crap, something's hurting her. Now, how do I deal with this? I'm going to be with her. And I know that doesn't hit us, right? Because we want perfection. You'll get it one day. You won't be breathing when you do. So then, before I get into my notes, how can we rethink the Christian vision in this light? We have presented the gospel as though there's this building that is on fire, and the fire was set by God, and there are people that are within this building being tortured. And it is our job, because of the blood of Jesus, to throw on our Jesus suits and run into the fire and save those poor souls from God's eternal flames. That sounds stupid to a lot of people who've been around for a while, but that really is what the gospel has been boiled down to. And I used to think, well, no, how about it's rather that, yeah, the building's on fire, but the people are sitting on the lawn, and our job is to just be like, hey, look, you're not in there. And that sounds good, but it still leaves God in this unfortunate position of being the fire starter. And that's still a bit of a problem. So I began to kind of think about it, and I'm like, what this is really more like is a cruise ship. And there's a captain, and we call him Jesus. And whenever you're aboard a cruise ship, the port of origin and the port of destination are already set. They're set by the captain, they're set by the cruise liner. There is nothing you can do to change where you debark and where you embark. We can get into the discussions of buying the ticket and all that, but this is we're going to take for granted that you understand that Jesus has bought the ticket. And you're on board this cruise ship, and you can do like Gabby and I did in St. Thomas, and you can get off not knowing that you can go on a water taxi for $5 to a nice beach, and you can start walking through an area of town that you probably shouldn't be in. And you can begin to feel like we felt, like, oh, God, we probably shouldn't be here. And we were lost. We didn't know where we were. We've never been to this island, and we were scared. And I'm little, so, like, I get scared easy. Like, I'm not one of these big guys that's like, I got you, babe. I'm like, get in front of me. We got somewhat lost. We eventually found our way, had a nice lunch, went shopping, bought too many $3 t-shirts, did what you do when you're on a cruise, got alcohol for half the price you can get it here. And then we came back to the ship and we realized that when you're getting back on the ship, they scan your key card. Because number one, like, they don't want to just like pick up anybody. And number two, they want to make sure that you got back on. And we found out that they will not leave port until they know what is going on with you. And you have to be on the ship, in other words, or they will not leave port. Unless you've gotten sick or died or and had to be, that doesn't play into my parable, so let's not talk about it. They're not going to leave. The captain has a responsibility to the people that are aboard his ship. He has a legal responsibility, he has a moral responsibility, and he has a social responsibility. Captains know this. This is why captains go down with their ship. Because they have a responsibility to the people aboard the ship to see that everyone returns to the port of origin safely. And we have presented the gospel as though the captain says, well, see y'all later, and he gets off the ship. If y'all want to follow me, beckon. And yet Jesus himself says, if one gets lost, will he not leave the 99 safely in the pen and go get them? If one of us got lost on that island, I can't say the captain would have done it, but one of the crew members would have come looking. And we're the crew members. This is what saying I believe in Jesus is all about. I want to participate in what you're doing. I want to be a crew member on your ship. Remember always that he is the captain and you are not the savior. You're working for him. And just like that, Jesus is not going to go anywhere without his ship fully booked. He's not going to depart and take off without you because you spent too long in the liquor store. He's not going to go to the next port and leave you sitting and waiting because you got lost and got into the wrong area of town. And because you were lost, you got afraid. And because you were afraid, you began to call out. And he heard you. Yeah, what about those who don't call out? He's still looking. Only problem is he sees. We think they're hiding. He sees. And he doesn't leave anyone behind. If you read anything in the Bible literally, read Luke 15 literally. The Father is utterly unwilling to do without all that belongs to him. There's your point of Luke 15. And just like everything, like Jeff was talking about, heaven becomes hell when the doctrine of hell touches heaven. Because when you start to think, well, what about this person? Am I going to have knowledge of that person not being with us in eternity? And you play it out with your children if you're a parent. Is your heaven going to be heaven if your child is burning in hell? No. And it takes extreme mental gymnastics to get there. And it takes gymnastics that aren't even in the Bible to get there. And so just like everything the doctrine of hell touches becomes hellish, to quote Jeff, I'd like to say that everything the Holy One touches is therefore hallowed. And so I've entitled this little brief thing, The Victory of Jesus and the Hallowing of Hell. We hold at the heart of our faith the incarnation of Jesus Christ, of the Word made flesh. God, one of us, Emmanuel, walking in our darkness, assuming it, taking it on, and transforming it. Notice that I didn't say God came in and escaped our darkness, because here's how you tell the difference between Gnosticism and the gospel. Okay? Gnosticism will promise you an escape. And the gospel will offer transformation. And transformation might take a lifetime. And Gnosticism will promise immediacy. And it's how it works. I mean, and I'm not saying that Gnosticism is evil. I'm just saying that the early Christians would not have professed what we profess in some of the things that we say, because they were dealing with this Gnostic belief. I mean, I know Jesus saw some immediacy, but you'll notice, like, Jesus isn't offering an escape when he sees the immediacy. People are just kind of coming to him like, Son of Man, have mercy on me. And he's like, yeah, you're fine. You know, but it's not like, well, look, I need you to recite my last 9 sayings 43 times, and then you'll be healed. You know, he kind of just like does it and then goes on his way, and most of the time he doesn't even want to do it. Jesus, they're hungry. Yeah, I can't be bothered with that. Jesus, they're thirsty. My time's not yet. Like, he shies away from the limelight. So the light of the world steps into our darkness, and by his own light transforms our darkness. Yes? There's a teaching within the Orthodox Church that it's how they frame Mary being ever virgin. And it's because of the presence of Jesus, everything that he touches is turned into a holy place. And her womb has therefore become the Holy of Holies because he touched it repeatedly for 9 months. And so it worked theologically, it kind of works. You know, I think it's more of a like, let's just kind of talk about it in a more open way thing. But we have this belief in the Bible too. Anybody know where I'm going to reference? Take off your shoes, because the ground you are upon is holy ground. Why? Because the presence of God is there. So anywhere, biblically, theologically, anywhere the presence of God is transformed into holy ground. So what then do we do with hell now that Jesus has not only defeated it, but has given it his own transforming light? His light's not like a twinkle light, okay? It's not like there's this immense, vast sea of darkness and someone turned on a little LED Christmas light. In the vast sea of human evil, here is Jesus. He's not a lighter at a concert. I mean, even the sun pales in comparison to the phrase, the light of the cosmos, because the sun's light doesn't reach so far. So if there's really nowhere that he goes that can't be transformed by his presence, then it might necessitate a rethinking of this dark and fearful place. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat hell as though there really is a literal place called hell. Okay? And go against everything we've taught this weekend. But what I'm doing is I'm giving you who disagree with us a different avenue to take, to still declare Jesus successful. Because I feel like if I can give you 100 different ways to say Jesus wins, and maybe we hold some differing beliefs, but we all say Jesus wins, who cares? Let's bicker and have fun and dispute it, and you know, let's talk about things. I don't agree with you there, and that's okay, and I can prove you wrong because I'm smarter. And I'm not me, I'm just saying this is what we do with each other. And, you know, that's fine. Debate is fun. It's part of human existence. Without debate, we would still have slavery. It's okay to debate. You know, don't be afraid of it. But it's when you start to debate and it gets personal. Like then, like shut your mouth, back off, say, wait, I used to be this horrible reactionary writer until I disconnected from Facebook. And then I begin to say, you know, there's a lot of stupid people out there and I don't need to respond to every stupid person. I mean, infinitely loved by God, but just dumb. And it's okay. There's a lot of areas where I'm really dumb. I don't get physics. A physicist would look at me and go, man, you're an idiot. And I'd go, yeah. Michael Hardin told me I was dumb about Jesus in one of the first conversations we ever had. You know, I could have risen up and been a jerk about it, or I can be like, well, okay, let's talk about this. And I grew because of it. Doesn't harm us. It's okay. So then it kind of necessitates we rethink all that would seem to be disciplinary or retributive or dark. And again, yeah, especially in the text. So we kind of believe that Jesus has come into our darkness, and we sort of believe that he's transformed it. And some of us believe that all means all. And some of us are starting to get, okay, I kind of see what you're saying. Maybe he really does hold all things together. And if he's taken on all that it means to be human, then is there a part of the human existence that he has not taken part in? Is there a part of the human existence that he has not played to its end? Is there anyone, anywhere, or anyone that could have fallen outside the reach of his light? The phrase, the light of the cosmos, we read it in the Bible as light of the world, but that word means cosmos, and it doesn't just refer to we think cosmos and we think, oh yeah, the new Neil deGrasse Tyson series. We think outer space. It's like, well, that's cool, and, are there aliens? I really don't give a rip. We got enough stuff to focus on here. He's the light of the cosmos means that all that is derives its life from him. In him was light, and that light was the life of men and women. This is men general. So the eternally pre-existent one is what, again, this is why theology matters. You know why the phrase, you begin in God and return to him, just doesn't fit? Because there is one eternally pre-existent one, and his name is Jesus. And when you begin to declare yourself eternally pre-existent, you've just crossed a line. And this is why, again, we have to kind of set these boundaries to say, wait a second. God is intimately involved in what is going on. Because if I'm eternally pre-existent, then he hasn't created me. And I'm just a soul that was already existent that he's playing a game with, sticking in a body to see what happens so he can choose whether or not I go back to him or to hell. It doesn't work. We are not pre-existent, and that is a love story. We are birthed in the heart of God when we are birthed. Let's put it that way. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. Okay? Doesn't mean Jeremiah was right. But that kind of knowledge is not talking about what we're saying with pre-existence, okay? Okay, so let's move on because we need to get going here. Jesus said that we will all be salted with fire. But then he goes on to say, and salt is good. How do we deal with that if only those who have disconnected from Jesus are thrown into the fire? We will all be salted with fire. This is an understanding that seems to be involved in mystical writing from before the time of Jesus, through Jesus. Paul says something about it. He talks about the stuff being burned away and only that, the good will remain, the gold and silver and all that, and the hay and stubble will be burned away. It's the same statement. We're going to pass through a fire. God is a consuming fire. We pass into his presence, and all that isn't viable for that presence goes away. It makes sense. So these literary exegetes will try to tell you that there is a fire that purifies and a fire that punishes. And I want to say that this is where I completely disconnect from universalism. Because I think that that is mental gymnastics done to keep an inerrant text intact. Well, we have to deal with the fact that it says there's a fire. Not necessarily. You might just want to deal with it by saying they were wrong. But this is kind of like one of the things that happens. Like you go through the fire, and it's painful, and God's like punishing you, but his punishments don't last forever. Well, that doesn't really fit with who he is and who he's revealed himself to be in Jesus. And then Jesus immediately says, but have salt in yourselves. So he's not advocating keeping a little piece of hell inside us, because we do that without instruction. We do. When I decide that you are the root source of all of my problems, I have become the Satan to you. When I decide that, let's pick an easy one, when I decide that the gays are what is wrong with American culture, I have become the Satan in that moment, because I have become accusation and I have become an adversary for children of God. And we want to say, well, this is this and this is this, and let's just deconstruct your Old Testament view of homosexuality for a moment. People learn one of two ways, through trial and error or through imitation. So when we find out why farmers don't think it's okay to put seed anywhere other than where it will produce offspring, we understand how they found that out. Either through trial and error or through imitation. They may have observed, hey, male-male sexual activity does not produce offspring in these animals. Therefore, it is an abomination. And you see kind of what the context is. To them, abomination means sex is purely procreational. So you're dealing with these laws that don't really even kind of fit in our time. There are people fleshing it out again. I'm completely off topic, but someone needed that. So Jesus isn't telling us keep a little piece of hell inside us. He's not advocating eternal conscious torment chamber where the Father smiles with glee as he assaults you for eternity with fire. Assaults you was a pun that I put in there on purpose. I even have it in there, note pun. And I didn't. I make myself laugh when I write and nobody else gets it. So I think that Jesus might be doing a little bit of Second Temple prophecy and saying the fire will be transformed. So keep it inside you. Quit giving it out. Quit laying it on other people. Keep it inside you and it will be transformed. So if we keep with this Orthodox tradition, and if we keep with the biblical tradition of everywhere he goes is made holy by his presence, Jesus is essentially telling us that the fire will become the Holy of Holies. Hell, as it were, will be hallowed. Made holy. Now, if you're online and you just sent an angry email, I don't monitor the church emails anymore, so get over it. Part of the reason that the Gospel of John talks about the darkness could not comprehend or overcome his light is that the darkness couldn't have seen it coming. Okay, it's not just that there was this cosmic battle. Darkness has no being of its own. Doesn't even see him coming. And I think all that makes it up, if we're going to talk about darkness having substance, must have been certain that even though the light was on its way, it would soon leave and darkness would return to the land once again. There's even a story in the Gospel of Nicodemus, I believe. I think that's it. And they're essentially in hell talking, and Beelzebub is talking to Satan, two different people. And one of them says to the other, we need to be careful. And he says, why? And he says, well, John the Baptist is here in hell. And he's, well, why do we care about John the Baptist? And he says, he's a forerunner of the Lamb. Meaning that he's come here first because Jesus is on his way. And then Jesus steps into hell and he ignores everyone and he walks to Adam and Eve and he grabs them and he walks out with them in his hands. And there's this beautiful Orthodox icon of Jesus coming out of hell, and he's got the gates of hell beneath his feet, and death and Hades are down there under his feet, dead. And he's walking humanity out because everyone follows Adam and Eve. He doesn't go, well, let's just go to the people from Noah's time because, everyone was evil before then, and God got pissed and killed them all, so let's just get them. He gets Adam and Eve and brings them out. And Paul renders this as he led captivity captive. So darkness' expectation of darkness returning to the land once the light of the world leaves is not how it works when the architect of the cosmos steps into human form. This is the picture of God we have got to get. When the light that is the life of all people enters the darkest places imaginable, and I'm not talking about the darkness of like human slavery and things like that. Jesus entered during one of the darkest times in history. In a time where oppression of the poor was at its highest. We're rapidly approaching it again. At a time where political oppression was at its highest, and we're rapidly approaching it again. And this is not like, I'm not saying we're in the last days. This happens every 500 years in the church. There's a massive reformation every 500 years. And what begins to happen is the church begins to realize that the prophetic voice is the voice that stands up to the empire. Is the voice that gets in the face of the king and says, absolutely not, God has called for justice. And sadly, in our day and age, getting in the face of the king means standing up in your church and saying, absolutely not. So when this light that is the life of all people enters these darkest places, they are forever rendered light. He dispels the darkness. That means it doesn't get to exist anymore. That doesn't mean I'm going to ground you for a week, but you can come back. Or as Michael points out in that God and Satan ebook I recommended, the Enoch myth talks about Azazel and his angels being put in this like valley like the Grand Canyon. And they're like reaching up and like doing this all, and they're in flames. And you see where we get our imagery? And they're reaching up and they're doing all this, and like one of them, I can't remember if it's actually Azazel, Jeff might know, or one of them says, hey, can you let us out? Can we at least like have some time to torment people? And God goes, sounds good. And this is essentially what we've presented. And Michael goes on to talk about, like, this is like God pronouncing you healed of lung cancer, only to go, but I'm going to go ahead and let the prostate stay. Like, it makes no sense. And even in this time of this Enoch myth, we have the belief that there is a host of evil forever imprisoned before Jesus. And they had to do some things to tell their story to like account for the existence of evil. So they say, but God let some of them out. But I mean, the beginning of the story is that God has taken care of that which is not good. And so even in the mythology that's behind it, it doesn't hold up. And the traces of his divine DNA were dripping from every open wound in his body. This is why sometimes, please, I want to say something after this weekend. Please don't like discount what my dad teaches on healing because I don't know what I believe right now. I'm serious. I hope none of you did. You probably didn't. But like, there's just areas I don't know. And that's all right. I'll yield to him knowing more than me, and I might say some things we don't agree with. I just included myself. And I wanted to say that because what we've got to understand is God didn't heal Jesus. The wounds remained open. I mean, we see it in Thomas. The wounds remain open because the scars of the cross reveal the inclusion of humanity. How'd you say it, Jeff? I can't remember. Religion will scar you. You said it a certain way at Stan's church that I would love to quote you. You don't remember it? Yeah, we'll find it and I'll put it on Facebook. I believe the reason that Jesus could say something as profound as have some salt in you when referring to salt as fire in a culture that believed fire to be bad is that he knows. He knows. The darkness cannot and will not stand. It will not have the victory. And the very place and symbol of darkness will soon be transformed by his existence there. You know, yes, we can get into all the mythology of the fact, like Jeff said, that there's entrances to hell in like the desert and one in the forest and one in the mountains. You know, but we can also get into the fact that like Hades is a place that's accessible by the river Styx and you can pay a boatman to go there. And then we can get into the fact that Peter says hell is a place reserved for the devil and his angels. Yes, I know, but the word that's used there is Tartarus. And if you know anything about mythology, Tartarus is a mountain that is utterly impenetrable by humans. They cannot get in or out. And it is where the Titans are imprisoned for their rebellion. He uses local folklore to talk about hell as a place that you can't get into, no matter what you do, because you are mortal. But how do we deal with the lake of fire in Revelation? You don't, because it's mythology. What? It's okay. Have you ever had a vision like that? And have your visions changed the more you've begin to believe that God is good and God is love? How many of you were in the prophetic movement and you got those like visions of judgment? We had them. We had people stand up in this church and talk about the mountains of judgment coming from Africa to America. And guess what? Didn't happen. Nothing new to humanity, folks. The place of holding will soon become a place of release. The place of captivity, this is from Jesus' perspective, will soon become the place of freedom, and the land of darkness will soon become a place of light, and the evil of evils will now become the holy of holies. Nothing to me could be more victorious, more divine, and nothing more like the God that says, "Behold, I make all things new," than for the place of fear and death to become the land of milk and honey. Behold, I make all things new. Leaves absolutely nothing out of that scope. So even if you can leave this weekend and say, that's fine, but I still believe in hell, awesome. Your God still declares that he makes all things new. Again, the Universalist tradition, as well as a few others, hold hell as a place of refinement where those who need the extra time to say yes are given the chance. This is where the Catholics got purgatory. This is where the Orthodox Church gets off into some weird toll house things. This is where, and not, I shouldn't say the Orthodox Church because that's not a common belief, but it's there. This is where we get some of our, like, some of the mystics talk about the land between here and there, and it's like a desert. They have to wander for a while until they really get a vision of God. This is where a lot of our talks about like the Indians entering into that spirit world, you know, like they all get it from the same idea. And that is that there is a place of refinement before you get to the divine. It's in the Viking traditions, it's in the Greek traditions, it's in the Roman traditions, it's in the Oriental traditions. There is always a place of refinement before you go to the divine because you are human and not refined yet. And so the Universalist tradition said, you know what? We have to keep the text intact, so what we're going to do is we're going to say, yes, hell therefore is a place of refinement. And all I have to say to that is God didn't need hell to walk out of Eden with Adam and Eve. They didn't need to be refined. They didn't need to have the dross purged. He just said, let's go. And again, I think that just kind of leaves the discussion a little flat because to me it keeps falling back on the need for an inerrant Bible. And to me, saying that the Scripture is inerrant is saying that Jesus is not. It's not a move I want to make. So what if hell has become a place of remembrance rather than a place of refinement? What if the embers we see burning are not coals, but the trace of Jesus' light still shining through the darkness, letting it know that it did not and will not ever have the final word? What if hell is more than a museum to point us to the Christ, more than a punishment chamber to keep us from him? What if we begin to treat hell like a trip through a Colosseum now, where we see the rubble, the stone, and the obvious signs of battle and triumph, but there remains no mortal in this theater? There's obvious signs of struggle. There's places where people were chained and held captive. There's blood from the lions, but there remains no means of captivity today, nor someone to hold you there. The pit where humanity met what it feared most, where men and women were pitted against lions for sport, has become the place where the lion has overthrown the king. And the Coliseum of Hell and all that it entails has become the monument of Jesus' success, the very holy of holies for his presence to manifest and make all things new. Man, this isn't scriptural at all. It's mystical. And it's a way of viewing Jesus that gives him success. I'm asking you to take a vision of Jesus. This is why I've gotten into contemplative prayer. This was all a contemplative exercise that I did that came out. And I begin to see the blood leaking from Jesus' hands and from his side and from his feet. And everywhere his blood hit, light came up. And it was red. And it looked like an ember. And it scared the hell out of the people that were watching it. But it's not fire. It's light. Bathed in blood. If there's nowhere that Jesus goes that doesn't become the Holy of Holies by his presence there, what does that say about you and I? All of the exclusionary teaching aside, we don't draw breath except the breath of life dwells within us. We don't live except the one who is life lives in us. We don't be except for his isness is granted to us. This means that humanity has been transformed to the same Holy of Holies and would be why the New Testament writers refer to the human body as what? The temple. The very dwelling place of God. So then Jesus has stepped into all that we are, all that we could have become, and rendered it new. What was dark has forever been made light. What was night has forever become the breaking of the dawn. And what was hell has been hallowed and transformed into the Holy of Holies, the place where his presence is on display, his victory given primacy, and his never-ending love remains the source of all things. Amen.